Hey there. So the podcast is currently on an extended hiatus so that I can write my next book and work on some other exciting projects. But while we're away, I hope you'll enjoy this fan favorite episode from the archives. If you want brand new content to help you make peace with food and heal from diet culture, come sign up for my free weekly newsletter at christyharrison.com/newsletter, where I answer a weekly listener question. And as always, if you join my Intuitive Eating Fundamentals course at christyharrison.com/course, you get access to our exclusive monthly Q&A podcast where I answer all your new questions. Just go to christyharrison.com/newsletter and christyharrison.com/course to sign up, or click the links in the episode description. Welcome to Food Psych, a podcast about intuitive eating, health at every size, body liberation, and taking down diet culture. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and I'm an anti-diet registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and author of the book Anti-Diet: Reclaim Your Time, Money, Well-Being, and Happiness Through Intuitive Eating, which is available wherever books are sold. Join me here every week as I interview interesting people from all different backgrounds about their paths toward peace with food and their bodies. And by the way, on this show, we bleep out diet culture stuff like weight and calorie numbers, but we don't censor swear words or other adult language, so listener discretion is advised.
Anti-diet revolution, we're for health at every size. Eat the foods you like. Food Psych.
Hey there, welcome to episode 206 of Food Psych. I'm your host, Christy Harrison, and today I'm talking with Rachel Estapa of More to Love Yoga, who's back for her second appearance on the pod. We talked about why mindfulness is a tool rather than a be-all, end-all, how seeking validation on social media mirrors seeking weight loss praise, how to balance vulnerability and boundary setting when we're sharing our lived experiences, the role of forgiveness in healing from diet culture, and so much more. I can't wait to share it with you in just a moment. It's a great conversation, and I shared some personal stuff of my own about boundary setting and how I was feeling when we recorded this. I'm happy to say I'm feeling a little less burnt out than I was when I was talking to Rachel on this episode, but you'll hear what I mean in the episode shortly. But first, I will answer this week's listener question. It's from a listener named Kelsey Graham, not Kelsey Grammer of Frasier, but Kelsey Graham, who writes, "Hi, Christy. First, I want to say thank you for your podcast. It's fantastic, and I've learned a ton, both personally and as a practitioner. My question today is about advertising yourself as an intuitive eating professional. I'm a professor and offer a small number of health coaching services as an intuitive eating counselor on the side. I'm very intentional about not advertising weight loss and explain the dangers of dieting and seeking weight loss with new prospective clients during their consultation phone call. I've found that a few times this has scared people off. I'm not sure if I'm coming off too heavy-handed or if they're feeling like because I think dieting is bad and they are looking to diet that I think they're bad, which of course I don't. But something seems to be landing poorly. Do you have advice on how you navigate this territory with new or potential clients in a way that's eye-opening but still encouraging for them? Thanks." So thanks, Kelsey, for that great question. And before I answer, just my standard disclaimer that these answers and this podcast in general are for informational and educational purposes only and are not a substitute for individual medical or mental health advice, or in this case, career advice. So this is a great question. I'm really glad that you're asking this question. And I know that we have a lot of listeners who work in the health and wellness field and who are likely asking themselves similar kinds of questions. So the first thing I think I would point out here is that it's okay if some people don't want to work with you because of your HAES approach or for any other reason, right? You're not going to be for everyone. And that's true of every professional out there, everyone in the world, honestly. You're not for everyone, and that's okay. And specifically with the health at every size approach and the intuitive eating approach, not everyone is ready for it. And the people who seem scared off by it just aren't a fit for you, and that's okay. They've self-selected out of your services, right? I definitely understand the feeling of worrying that you're coming across as telling them that they are bad. And of course, we don't want to shame anyone who is seeking weight loss, right? And I'm sure that's not your intent. I doubt it's even necessarily the impact that you're having, because I'm going to point out a few things that I think are more germane to why these people aren't working with you in just a moment. But of course, for all of us in the intuitive eating and health at every size field, we have to be sure to point out that it's not dieters that we're criticizing. We're anti-diet, but we're not anti-dieter, right? We're not against the people who are doing it. We're not against people who are wanting to diet. And in fact, we completely understand the pressures on people that would lead them to want to shrink their bodies, right? We're fighting against diet culture. We're not fighting against the people who are participating in diet culture, unless, of course, those people are harming others through their actions, right? We can fight against people in positions of power who are harming others through their participation in diet culture, but we're not fighting against the people who are just everyday dieters, right? Who are wanting to lose weight, because of course that's understandable in diet culture. And so our job really, I think, as intuitive eating counselors or other health and wellness professionals working in this space, working in health at every size and intuitive eating, is to tell people the reasons why diets don't work, the reasons why intentional weight loss is likely to do more harm than good, and then allow them to make their own choices, right? But in that process, those of us who are really committed to this movement, and as a certified intuitive eating counselor, I know you are, we also can't collude with the diet mentality. We can't support diet culture by encouraging weight loss or tacitly endorsing weight loss or, co-signing someone's weight loss, et cetera, right? So we have to draw a line. We have to be in alignment with our values while also honoring that some of the people who work with us probably do still want to lose weight and have that in the back of their mind. And it's a really different thing for someone to have a desire to lose weight and to say something like, I still have this desire to lose weight in the back of my mind, but I know that it hasn't served me in the past. And I'm really interested in exploring an approach that doesn't focus on weight. I'm interested in exploring intuitive eating and, feeling freer in my body and feeling more accepting of my body at this size and making peace with food. That type of person, the person who's like, I have a desire to lose weight, but I'm still interested in exploring intuitive eating, is very different than the type of person who is scared off by your approach. So that first type of person is one that you can help and one who's ready for an intuitive eating and health at every size approach, while that second person who gets scared off is clearly not ready. And if you did somehow convince the second person to work with you, it would most likely be just a matter of a few sessions before they left to go find someone to do weight loss because they really weren't ready for intuitive eating and health at every size. Now, I know as a practitioner, as a provider of healthcare services, I know there are the economic realities of running a practice, and it's totally understandable that you might feel like you can't afford to turn any clients away at this point, and that you should just do whatever it takes to get people in the door and then shift them over to an intuitive eating and health at every size approach after they start working with you. But I will share that I've found, and I know a lot of my colleagues have found this too, pretty much every colleague that I've talked to about this issue has found that that approach of sort of baiting and switching, or getting them in the door with one thing and then kind of trying to transition them over into intuitive eating and health at every size, just leads to frustration for both the practitioner and the client, because neither of you is really getting what you want or what you thought you signed up for. So I talked about that a bit in last week's episode with Lindsay Krasna about how, straddling the fence and having some of your marketing talk about weight loss or weight management while also offering intuitive eating and health at every size is just confusing. And it's not in alignment for the practitioner, which ultimately takes a toll on your well-being, on your ability to do this work and feel good about it. And it's not helpful to the client either. It's really just frustrating to the client. And as Lindsay and many other people I know have shared, and as I've experienced myself in my work, you can actually have a much more thriving practice where people seek you out specifically because of your clear commitment to intuitive eating and health at every size if you stop straddling the fence. And that's been true for so many of my fellow practitioners in our field as well, no matter where their own bodies fall on the size spectrum. I also had a look at your website, Kelsey, and I just had a couple of thoughts on how your marketing might be bringing in people who are looking for weight loss. That's really the crux of this issue, I think, is that your marketing is offering one thing, right? It seems to be offering weight loss, and then your talks with them in your discovery call is offering something else or kind of contradicting what you say on your website. So the first thing I noticed was that there are images of you leading exercise classes and you're in a thin body and so are all the participants. And that kind of photo just unintentionally sends the message that working with you is going to lead to thinness, even if that's not at all the message you're meaning to send, right? It's just these kind of images really just tell a story or set a tone. And so that's the first thing that maybe could be giving some people the idea that this is kind of diety, right? That what you do is sort of weight loss oriented. So a better photo to use to illustrate your services might be something like a stock photo of athletic shoes or a yoga mat or, something that's not at all having to do with people or bodies. Or if you want to show people, you could show someone in a larger body moving in a joyful way, in a non-punishing way, none of those terrible stock photos of like people measuring themselves or feeling bad about themselves while moving, right? It's looking for things like stock photos on sites like Representation Matters, which we'll link to in the show notes. And I also talked with Lindley Ashline, who founded it back in, forget the episode number, but we'll link to her episode in the show notes too. So, you could do something like that, right? Stock photo of someone in a larger body enjoying movement, or of a group of people in larger bodies or diverse types of bodies engaging in movement together and having fun. And then the next thing I noticed on your website as I sort of dug in, which might be more germane to why people are expecting you to do weight loss, is that there are weight loss testimonials on your website. And I've had conversations with people before who pitched me for the podcast or approached me about something, and I was considering working with them, and I had a look and was like, oh my God, there's weight loss testimonials on this person's website, and told them, and they were like, I had no idea. I totally forgot those were there. Thank you. I'll take those down, right? So I have a feeling that maybe you've forgotten about these testimonials too, but I was able to link to them pretty easily from your homepage. And there they were. So that is definitely something that would attract people who are looking for weight loss. And so I would recommend taking those off, really going through all the testimonials you have and just taking out the ones that have anything to do with weight loss. And then one other thing is that I think you could get even more specific and clear in your messaging to say that you specialize in intuitive eating and health at every size, and get rid of any vague terms that could be interpreted in a diet culture way. Like this phrase from your site really jumped out at me. It says, "We use evidence-based guidelines to help you develop wellness strategies that align with your values, lifestyle, and goals." Someone who's looking for weight loss or who's in diet culture, right, and the diet mentality can easily read that to mean that you'll help them lose weight. And conversely, someone who's really ready for intuitive eating might actually be scared off by that sentence because it sounds a little diety. So the person who's really ready might see that as like, oh, she sounds diety, I don't know, and then not even book a discovery call with you. Whereas the person who's looking for weight loss is like, okay, cool, sign me up. She's going to help me lose weight. That's what my quote unquote goals are, right? My goal is weight loss. And she says she's going to help me move towards my goals with evidence-based strategies or whatever. So it sounds kind of diety. So I would work on getting rid of phrases like that. Or this other sentence stood out to me too. It was straightforward and evidence-based strategies for improving eating habits. And so that says to me like, oh, she's going to tell me how to eat, and she's improving eating habits, quote unquote, means that there's a bad way to eat and a good way to eat. And so a potential client who's looking for weight loss or who is in diet culture is going to assume that that means you'll tell them what to eat and not to eat, and you'll tell them all of this in service of weight loss, right? Whereas a potential client who's really ready for intuitive eating might be scared off by that phrase because it sounds like it could be another diet. So you're probably actually, with your marketing, doing a lot of filtering already without even knowing it, so that by the time someone gets to a discovery call with you, they've already weeded themselves out if they don't see themselves represented in your site. And I think that includes a lot of people who are actually really ready for intuitive eating because, as I've said on the podcast before, diet culture is trauma. Diet culture is traumatizing. It creates a trauma response in people who've been exposed to it, especially people who've had negative experiences over a long period of time with dieting. And so for people who are in that boat, the phrases that sound a little diety can be extremely triggering and can make people feel bad and feel anxious and kind of want to run away, even without knowing why. And so really, I think as anti-diet and intuitive eating providers, it's our job to strip away that language that can be so triggering of diet culture and not bring people back to that mindset, not take people back to that anxious, bad, yucky feeling place, but instead to give them a vision of what's possible, a vision of something completely different, completely outside of diet culture. And we do that by using clearer language, by taking away those words and sentences that can be easily twisted in service of diet culture. And being more clear and specific that what we offer is actually intuitive eating and health at every size. And we don't tell you what foods are good and bad. We actually help you discover what foods you like and enjoy and open up to the foods that were previously forbidden on all of your diets. And we help you learn to nourish and care for your body at whatever size it is, including the very largest bodies, and that we don't discriminate based on body size. We'll never tell you to lose weight. We'll never stigmatize you for your weight, right? So all of these things are more specific pieces of language that you could put into your website to really attract the clients who are ready for intuitive eating and who want to work with you as an intuitive eating counselor versus the people who are like looking for weight loss and want to work with a weight loss coach, because then it's that bait and switch moment where when they get on the phone with you, they're like, why is she telling me about how weight loss doesn't work and diets are bad when I thought she said on her website that she was a weight loss coach, right? So that's just kind of my like quick scan of your site. But I think that just changing some of those details could be really helpful, and maybe doing a bit of a deeper dive into all your content to make sure it's really in alignment with the intuitive eating coaching that you're doing, rather than sort of an older version of your brand and business that, because we all have websites that evolve over time, right? But if you are still stuck in an older version of your brand or business with your website, people don't necessarily know to expect something different now. I teach an occasional course on marketing called Master Your Anti-Diet Message, where I go into all this stuff in a lot more detail. And I actually walk you through the process of reviewing and revamping your website to bring it into alignment with intuitive eating and health at every size principles. So if you want to know more about that, you can sign up to get more info at christyharrison.com/message. It's christyharrison.com/message. I've been doing that course as a live online workshop a couple times a year for the past few years, but actually this year has been so busy for me with writing and editing my book that I haven't had time to offer it live yet. So I'm thinking of actually releasing a recorded version of that course that you can take anytime, sometime in the future. So if you'd be interested in that, if you want to learn more and just have me email you when that's available, if I end up doing that, you can sign up for my email list to get notified at christyharrison.com/message, and we'll send you all the details whenever that happens. So I hope that helps answer the question. And if you want to submit your own question for a chance to have it answered on an upcoming episode, go to christyharrison.com/questions. That's christyharrison.com/questions, and you can submit your question there. And then if you want to ask me any question you want and have me answer it much more quickly, actually ask multiple questions every month and have me answer them by the next month, you can join my online course, Intuitive Eating Fundamentals. In that course, I do an exclusive monthly Q&A podcast where you get to ask me all your own questions and have me answer them within the following month. And you can also listen to hundreds of answers I've given to other participants over the last several years so that you can really work through all the different sticking points in intuitive eating and put them into practice in your own life. Plus, you get 13 modules of audio and written content teaching you the principles of intuitive eating and walking you through some of the problem spots that people have with them so that you don't turn intuitive eating into another diet. When you join, you also get access to our private community forum, which is exclusively for course participants, so that you can have daily guidance from me and my team, as well as hundreds of other great people who are on this intuitive eating path with you. A participant named Lisa recently said, "I've just finished with Module 9, and I really feel like I'm less obsessive about food these days and have stopped restricting. It's such a relief." Another participant named Kareen said, "I enrolled in the Intuitive Eating Fundamentals course and it is fabulous and so helpful. I feel such a debt of gratitude to you for what you're doing. I knew I was spending too much time and energy focusing on food and exercise and worrying about my body, but I had no idea how much of my life it was sucking away until I was on the other side. And I can never go back. My life has opened up and I have the headspace to pursue things I'd never imagined." If you're ready to break free from diet culture and reclaim the life it stole from you, you can learn more and sign up for the course at christyharrison.com/course. That's christyharrison.com/course. And now, without any further ado, let's go talk to Rachel Estapa. So Rachel, welcome back to the show. I'm so glad to be talking with you again.
It is so good to hear you. I can even visualize our last conversation that we had together. And we hung out maybe like a year or two ago in Nashville. So I'm very happy to be back.
Yes. Oh my God. It was so nice to hang out with you in person and experience Nashville for the first time too. That was so much fun.
Yeah.
I am so excited to hear about everything you've been up to since at least the last time we spoke on the podcast, but also the last 2 years have been such a whirlwind of change for you, it seems like. And you were on the show last in episode 101, which was released in April of 2017. So that's like, probably we recorded it like a year and a half ago, I would imagine. Or sorry, 2.5 years ago by the time this comes out.
A lifetime ago.
A lifetime ago. Yeah. Yeah. So catch us up. What has been going on in your world since then?
Oh, man. Well, I have been very active with growing More to Love yoga, and so excited to share and report back that lots and lots and lots of new people that have never tried yoga before can say that they have tried yoga before with me, both in person and online. And the biggest piece from the last time we talked is that I won a really big national-wide contest with Bank of America and MasterCard, specifically to grow More to Love. So it's been like a whirlwind of having my visibility increase, but also just people understanding that I'm a larger body and larger bodies can do yoga and love it, and that it's something that it's so timely and exciting. So there's been so many cool projects that have originated from just the desire to incorporate and include more people in wellness, in yoga, without requiring anyone to change anything, which I think is what we're all craving, right? That's the heart of your work. That's the heart of my work. So it's just building on what me and you live for ourselves day to day with other people. So it's been amazing.
That is so cool. And yeah, I've really loved seeing this trajectory for you. I think it's rare in our space for someone to get recognized by it almost feels like the powers that be, like Bank of America and MasterCard are such big names. And to win a contest to grow a business that is specifically devoted to helping people in larger bodies accept themselves and love themselves without trying to shrink themselves is kind of revolutionary and just mind-boggling, It's pretty amazing that this is where we are as a cultural moment.
It really is. And I had that conversation with Bank of America and MasterCard, and also other larger institutions that I'm partnered with, like the Kripalu School of Yoga. I've worked with Harvard University, Mass General Hospital. The work that our peers have been laying groundwork for the past few years, they get it. And they're seeing the value in including people and just changing the tone, changing the conversation, that people want a different relationship with themselves, and they're being smart about it. Bigger places are this is where their interests are going, and also owning kind of the things that have made it bad for people in the past. So I actually had a really long conversation with Bank of America and being how are you as a corporation going to be responsible to the little person, right? The one-off person, and not feel exploiting. And they haven't. It's so progressive. I've worked with almost entirely women on the team, which says something too. But the tide has and is shifting. There's plenty more to go, but I'm cool with taking the little wins as they come, because it's just there's momentum. And more people are realizing that, well, it's not that they don't realize that diets haven't worked. We've known that, in our souls, in our bodies, we've got tons and tons of really good evidence, right? So people are finally finally, there's this sense of relief, and then excitement comes back in. And that's really been the most amazing thing, at least for me, to see that, because it mirrors a lot of my own transition from, being focused on becoming a smaller body, because I was kind of raised that way, and just the messages that be, and having a breakdown. But then from that, creating a whole new path where my wellness and my well-being is still at the center as it was. It's just in a way that is way more authentic, way more energizing to how I want to live my life. And that's what's so cool to see that happening for other people. And it's just going to keep going.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm so curious too to dig into this piece with, Kripalu and Harvard and some of the large wellness institutions, because Bank of America and MasterCard's financial institutions, that's one thing to be financially backed by them. That says a lot already. But to be getting into the mainstream wellness field, and the working with people who are, or with institutions that are so entrenched in that system of viewing bodies and food that is steeped in diet culture. That's got to be so interesting, and I'm sure was a process.
Yeah, well, so at least for Kripalu, I can talk about that one. For those that aren't familiar with it, and I'm a yoga teacher, and I, for years and decades, my whole life, had a very clear mental image of what a yoga body looked like. Very thin, very flexible, like a gymnast type of flexibility, really pretty, usually very blonde and thin and white. But also there's this aesthetic of not being clumsy and messy and real. So when I was learning yoga, I definitely had that. I was comparing myself to that mental image. But the more that I started practicing yoga, the more I felt like this was such an amazing tool for my own healing. And when I was kind of had this haunting thought, and I'm sure you've had this too, or anyone has had this, where this idea, this pull keeps coming back to you, and you kind of like, I can't become a yoga teacher. Like, I don't look like, you just sort of downplay, right? And the voice just got too loud. And I approached Kripalu which is in my hometown, my home state of Massachusetts, but it's in the Berkshires, and it's sort of like the largest wellness center and yoga center in North America. Long lineage, like the best of the best go there to give their presentations. And I was like, you don't have anyone that looks like me in your catalog. I practice yoga, and I love it, and I don't see myself being reflected in that. I want to change that. So I'm going to go to school and learn with you guys. And they were like, awesome. Like, we love this. We want to be able to make yoga much more diverse, but not give lip service to that. And they have been such an amazing partner. I've led my retreats at Kripalu, and I've been able to design all of my More to Love yoga retreats to be a safe place for larger bodies coming. And also, this coming fall, going to be speaking for the first time at their annual yoga teacher conference about how to make your yoga classes plus size friendly. So, timing in life is a lot of energy, is a lot of the things that we have to work on, but it has to start with me knowing and saying to larger institutions, there's an opportunity here, and for them to realize that they can't ignore this anymore, right? They can't ignore how bodies have been treated and clinically diagnosed for decades. Like, the collateral toll is much worse than what they're quote unquote trying to fix with people. Kripalu has been wonderful with that. And even at Harvard, like, I created a wellness program within a central administrative office that has been going on for 5 years. And I come in and I sort of give guide. So, like, places want to feel that they're progressive, but you can't just like slap it on there. They're actually in the ways that they can, through programs, through initiatives, through partnerships, saying like, yeah, let's make this easier for you to reach people, for our people to get support in a different way, especially in the wellness arena where there's so much baggage.
So much diet culture. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's interesting too, like this idea of wanting to be progressive and sort of bringing fat acceptance into that fold, right? Because I think historically, even progressive people, and especially in the quote unquote wellness space, people like Michael Pollan or Marion Nestle or Eric Schlosser, ostensibly very progressive thinkers, actually still have tremendous amounts of weight stigma that they disseminate through their work without even seeing it and realizing it. And I think that's gotten so woven into how progressive people think about food and speak about food and the food system and our food culture. And so to sort of bring that out and say, to call out weight stigma or to counter weight stigma in these more progressive spaces, I think is huge. And I think too, like you're saying, that organizations that see themselves as progressive, that have a lineage of being progressive in various other ways, have to sort of wake up to that and say, okay, there's been something missing in our effort to help all people or to be equitable in our work.
Yeah, I mean, and it's something like, it's, in honesty, this was sort of an accidental avenue of my work. I didn't intend to sort of be partnered and affiliated and known to be with like larger companies, because that really started with what I talked about in the first time we had a conversation on your podcast, was that like owning your own story. there is so much power in being truthful about what you experience and then sharing it. And this is just a continuation and an expression of what I have learned to believe is so powerful in my life, and really is at the heart of More to Love, meaning there's this part of you that is timeless, that is essentially yourself. And how do we make our lives just an extension of that? So the opportunities that we take, the thoughts, the media that we consume, it all plays into it. Like, I have a very big picture view of how my life integrates, but how do I do, what are the little steps day to day? Like sharing about my body image struggles, sharing about my body image triumphs, my yoga. Like, none of what has transpired with, like, on a bigger stage would have been possible if I didn't take that time to really dig within and get the help and support on, like, the Rachel level, which is what I think the visibility has allowed other people to do. Allowed other people to say, like, wow, other people are having these conversations about, like, being traumatized by years and years of dieting and the diet culture and just the whole, like, nexus and just ecosystem of that. I'm allowed to say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't really working for me. Whose definition of wellness am I using? Right? Like, whose version of health am I using? And even those terms, like, I get asked a lot, like, what does wellness mean? What does health mean? And I'm like, if you go look into a medical book, like, there's a gazillion different definitions, and that's kind of the point. You know what I mean? Like, it's such an intimate, personal resonance that we won't have an answer. We won't have, like, a crystal solid platform for what does it mean to be well? What does it mean to be healthy? And I think that's a good thing, right? I think that's a good thing overall. So as much as corporations and, like, bigger places are navigating what this wellness world means, so are we as citizens. So are we as individuals. And it's just nice to have it when things sort of align.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned too the visibility piece, and that your visibility is helping other people, and definitely, that sort of representation really matters. Representation matters, right? As we always say. And as the name of a wonderful stock photo site as well, representation matters.
Yes.
So it's really awesome that you're able to give that to people. And I think your audience, I'm sure, is being really touched by that. But for you, how is that? We were talking a little bit off mic about the sort of challenge of visibility and vulnerability and sharing yourself and having, now this bigger spotlight on you.
Yeah.
How has that changed your own way of navigating vulnerability and maybe necessitated some boundaries that you might not have had to set before?
Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, that is the balance that I'm personally always the most aware of. So I'm pretty open about the majority of my life. Like, I have anxiety and low-level depression. It's called dysthymia. And, I've had that forever. And so a lot of times there's this ebb and flow of how I feel about myself and my contributions in the world. And after the Bank of America commercial, so I created a commercial with Bank of America and it went national. It was like people were texting me and being like, I just saw you on TV. I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. And a lot of amazing comments and support came from it, but also a lot of nasty and negative comments came from it. So around the end of last year, I was having, like, a visibility hangover where I felt so incredibly seen and proud, but also very vulnerable, because More to Love is based upon a transformation of my own, like, the biggest issue that I've had with myself. How do I relate with my body, my larger body? And I'm very open about it. It is not something that I would ever say, like, oh, I'm all settled and fixed with it. That's kind of not the point. That it is a relationship that I will be in with for the remainder of my life. So what I really learned from it was that being visible and being known for something that you believe in does not mean that you also don't have fear and tenderness around it. It's almost like I became so much more aware of what were the parts of me that needed extra TLC. And it also made me feel much more connected to the things in my life that did give me love and support, like my family, like my friends, like my daily routines and habits. So it became a self-care spotlight, right? Because we can get, and I can see how people can get so caught up in that, like, do it for the numbers, do it for the likes, do it for the visibility. And it can be exciting, but I knew that that race was pulling me off my center. And I'm best when I'm aligned. So I kind of took a little bit of a break for about maybe a month or two where I didn't post much on social media. I didn't actively promote anything because I was like, I need to just reground. I need to recuperate. I don't want to go down the path of always feeling like I'm chasing, right? Because that's just not ever going to be, you're never going to get there. And I'm always about like, what's the intention of this? What's the heart and soul of my work? And it really is, how do you relate to your ever-changing self? So if I can't talk about more to love and I can't teach yoga to larger bodies and do all of that unless I'm living it, unless I'm taking the time to be uncomfortable, to like understand like why did that random stranger's nasty comment like bother me so much more than like all my loved ones' praise? Like it's those little things. And we do that with every scenario, right? Like how do those little hiccups and bumps pull us away from ourselves? And it's not for me, it's more important about giving yourself the conditions and the parameters to help guide you back. Like yoga for me, being quiet. I realized that I needed to reinstate a wind down routine into my day where there was this sort of like, I didn't have to do anything. I just had to like be still and take things that were pleasurable for myself. Like I created like a whole new skincare routine from it, like so it became an opportunity to like reconnect with things that I love. But that wouldn't have necessarily happened unless I had this really big, stark contrast of like, everybody knows my stuff. But that doesn't mean that that I have to change who I am, that I'm a different person. Yeah. So it's been an interesting ride. And especially now. So another thing, I was on a billboard all around the country.
Oh, that's right.
Which was obnoxiously hilarious. And again, like, so people like, how are you not excited about this? I was like, of course I am. But I'm like, I work on being grounded, so, and if more people get to learn about yoga, then awesome. Like that's the way it should be.
Well, yeah. And I think that's such an important piece of this too, is like connecting to the message and the why you're doing it. Because I mean, I've found for myself as I've become more visible and I'm sort of gearing up and trying to steel myself and do some preemptive self-care before the book comes out, because I know that's just going to take it to the next level of visibility. But I found that as the visibility has increased, I've gotten more and more sort of attached, and I think it's impossible not to, like more and more attached to the praise. But when you get attached to the praise, you also get, you're suddenly judging yourself by external values and measures. And so it's impossible not to get pulled into being hurt by the criticism too.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like a drug, you're chasing that dragon, you're chasing that high of like the first time someone recognized you or gave you some good feedback or whatever, it was like, felt so wonderful and really got in there, at least for me, like really sort of landed and made me feel good. And now it takes more and more to do that. It takes more and more good feedback to sort of make a dent in my day-to-day self-image or my day-to-day just kind of going along and doing my thing. But it also doesn't take as much, weirdly, like takes even less criticism to make any sort of dent, And I think that part of, we were talking off mic about how I'm actually going to take the rest of the summer off from podcasting. And I'm actually going to try to take all of August as much as possible off of work as I can. Like I have a vacation planned in there anyway, but I'm also going to try to not work very much except for on the book and like the little last minute stuff that has to be done, and just take it easy and reground, because I feel like I've gotten away from, because things have gotten so busy for me, like I've gotten away from some of my self-care routines and my ability to decompress and unwind in the ways that really nourish me. And I'm feeling that. I'm feeling that in my body. I'm feeling that in my ability to be present and to have fun and enjoy my work, and also to unplug and enjoy my life outside of work. It's really been hard for me at the end of a day to sort of mentally step away, even if I physically wrest myself away from the computer and out of the office and like go to another room, I'm still mentally in it. And so I'm like, okay, I need to get back to the practices that help me shift gears more easily.
Yeah. I mean, that really is the point, right? the thing that I'm personally the most afraid of, and just to be honest, is having another depressive relapse around this, to being fatigued mentally, physically, emotionally, but also, because I use this term, spiritually, that the thing that fuels me turns into a resentment. And I don't want that to be the case. I think everyone kind of has that thing where you, and this is, I'm going to say this may be an American thing. I'm not sure. I've only lived in America, but this belief that passion has to be 100% of the time. And that any deviation, especially when you're an entrepreneur, any deviation from that, like, work it, grind it, hustle, like, how many times have we heard those terms? And I'm saying this, and it's not like anything brilliant. That's the next sort of thing to kind of come back down to the ground, meaning like the way that we have forced ourselves to push, to strive, to be more, to be better, to be faster. It's unsustainable and it's damaging in a way that the same way that diet culture has been, the way that we've treated our bodies. Now we're so focused on how productive we are. And that's what I personally deal with a lot with. Like, it's so easy for me to have, a very good work day for 6 hours or something. And then right when I take a little break, I get guilty. I get guilty about it. And that sucks because it's a no-win for anybody. And the term is self-care. I sort of think about it in like a couple ways. Self-care, I got my manicure and pedicure today after a long time. I don't consider that self-care though. I consider that just like grooming, like to me, self-care is the stuff that you could do it in the middle of nowhere. No money required, no appointments required. And the key point is nobody else has to know. And that isolation, that being alone, that like not doing something for the praise of others, that's really hard. And we're in that, especially when our businesses are so tied to our identity. Your work is what you believe in, and my work is what I believe in. And then to know, like, well, who am I outside of this? Like, and also, who am I outside of having a past with body image struggles? And those are really hard questions. And they're not going to be answered tomorrow, but we have to be able to sit with them because we're talking about like quality of life here. And I think all of us feel unbelievably heartbroken when our lives, when there's this big gap between what we know is possible and right for us, and the gap is when our life is just chaotic and it's just happening around us. And that can happen if whether you have a business, a family, like it doesn't matter. Like we're all equal in that way. But I think it takes understanding that less is more when it comes to self-care. It doesn't have to be a grand retreat or an epic adventure. It can be something as small as, turning off your phone before bed.
I love that.
Yeah. And I say this a lot in More to Love, and especially in More to Love yoga, that like the littlest things, like if it takes more than like 2 minutes to do something, I'm not interested. Like we don't want to have like another thing to do in our life. Like, so I'm so focused on like helping people, just when you're breathing, like when do you stop breathing? Are you like those little things, like a breath? Like who cares about a breath? Your body cares about breath an awful lot. Your nervous system cares about your breath an awful lot. It's the little things. And I have to remember that too, because I am such a big picture thinker.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like what you said about American culture, and I would say maybe Western culture / capitalism in general, pushing us in this direction of like productivity. I think it really extends to like social media too, like always feeling like you have to perform your worthiness, perform your lifestyle, quote unquote. And all of us are brands and we all like have to be the face of our business or whatever, which I mean, I've really fought against in my work and I don't do that. And, I think that in some ways helps my self-care and my mental health, in some ways hinders my business, but I sort of refuse to go that route. But I do think still we're sort of pushed to like share about our self-care or share about every little thing that we're doing. And there's this constant sense of, I mean, I have heard people in our space, like people in this self-actualization field and, specifically around health at every size and fat acceptance, like heard people sort of half jokingly, but not really actually kind of seriously say like, if it wasn't on Facebook, it didn't really happen or whatever, and I'm just like, oh, I cringe at that because what does that say? Like, what are we doing to ourselves that we can't feel fulfilled or that we've lived a life or done something if we didn't share it. And I would say even like the verb to share on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or anywhere else is kind of like a misnomer. I don't think it's really sharing so much at all. It's like, it doesn't feel authentic in the way that the word to share actually means, where there's like reciprocity and there's community and vulnerability. Like it's often just sort of going out into the void, I think, especially as we get more and more visible.
Yeah, that propensity to prove, right? Because that's really kind of what I think is at the heart of why we share stuff online. It's to prove worth. And when even me just thinking about that, the first thought that came to my mind was that how I used to crave the compliments for active weight loss. When people would comment, "You look so good." How at first that's like the druggy part of it. That's like this is why I'm doing it. Their approval, their validation, their recognition. And it's a human thing, right? It's like we're humans, that's like what we do. We were wired to connect. But it's just interesting how things can pick up from one area and get planted into another. And again, like I said, I personally struggle with that. What do I want to be recognized for and with? And what do I want to own and have purely for myself or those that I really genuinely care about? And that's a conversation about vulnerability, intimacy, your own way to sit with yourself, which is uncomfortable and which is not praised at all in a capitalist society. We're broken down into how efficient can we be. And healing and transformation and growth, not efficient. At all. and like I think I may have even touched upon this in our last conversation, that like we operate in like two ways of time. Like there's the time that you can put on your calendar and schedule it, and like, oh, I got a doctor's appointment here, I got that. Very good for navigating the world. But then there's that deeper part, that stuff that happened years ago will not make sense until probably 5 or 10 years from now. And that's the long game. And I'm the type of person where I'm much more interested in that aspect, that evolution, that process. I think I'm like almost obsessed with that. Like how does something start somewhere in your life and as an idea, and the connections, and it just evolves and flows and becomes something. I mean, that's creation. That's like the beautiful part about what life can be, is just like letting things evolve naturally. And when we try to control, right, whether that's through restrictive eating, whether that's through restrictive working out, whenever we try to like put reins on a natural process, we suffer for it. And bodies, tech, jobs, families, doesn't matter. Like whenever we're trying to rein in something that is timeless about us, it hurts. It makes us feel sad. It makes me feel sad. So it's not an easy conversation. Again, Christy, our conversations go into like these like esoteric.
I know.
Food. In my world, it's all connected.
Same. And I think especially the sort of connection between diet culture and capitalism is something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, because of my own patterns that I've been feeling, the pressure to perform, the pressure to be productive, and thinking about the parallels, because I just wrote this whole book about diet culture and like the parallels of how diet culture pushes us to think in these certain ways and to always be performing health or now in this day and age of the wellness diet, as I call it. It's like we're performing wellness in this particular way. And there's this idea that like, yeah, I think one of the things people have to mourn when they give that up, when they give up dieting and the wellness diet and come to intuitive eating, they have to sort of mourn that like they don't have a metric anymore to judge themselves by. And those metrics can be really addictive. And they don't have the sort of social praise that comes along with posting your workout on social media and having people be like, great job, or like your weight loss journey or whatever, and having people give you the praise for that. There's no way to sort of visually, I mean, people try on Instagram by sharing pictures of food and stuff like that, but there's no way to sort of easily capture moments in this journey that I think also are private moments to begin with. And so it's very hard to share some of these like private transformations of quiet discovery of like, oh, wow, I thought I liked this diet food and it turns out I really don't once I'm allowed to eat the thing that I really want or whatever. Those moments aren't quite as praised and as socially valued in our society as like, look at this person's before and after picture or whatever.
Yeah. And I've used that word too, the mourning of the structure, of the hope of what diets offered, right? Because in reality, they were like 99% hope. And when that doesn't come to fruition, even though it was not maybe a great thing for you, there's still a loss. And you can't skip over that, right? And that sometimes I think causes some frustration even with intuitive eating, definitely body acceptance, body love, is that things happen in an instant. That, you can go from one day being all about weighing less, and then the next day you're embracing everything. Like, it doesn't happen like that. It's a process that has to start with unraveling and mourning what didn't work out, and that's an intimate thing. And if you want to share it, I think it's very cathartic to share. At least for me, when I was really unraveling and unpacking my own history with dieting and how ingrained it was, like, it was very cathartic to share that. But this was also before I had a business, right? Like, I didn't make that. So it was for me. It was 100% for me. Which again, that's like another conversation. How do you transform that into a business? I don't think I would be successful if I hadn't unpacked it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, there needs to be that.
I think unpacking it and doing that work for yourself before starting a business is so key, because I see people who are still really in the thick of things, like really early on in the journey, trying to start a business around helping other people heal or whatever. And I think that can be so fraught because they get pushed into a position of leadership that they're not ready for, that they still need it to be just for them, but they're not letting it, or it's not allowed to be just for them anymore. And that, I think, can get really complicated.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the harder transitions for me. Personally, I've been practicing yoga for over a decade, for about like 11 or 12 years. But More to Love today has only been around for about 4 years with the yoga. So I had to make a transition that my personal yoga that I need is not what I do with More to Love necessarily. And that's okay. You see a lot of people sharing, especially yoga, like sharing online, and people have become wildly successful from it. And it's awesome. I personally never felt that it was an alignment for me to share my own yoga practice, which seems bizarre because I'm a yoga teacher and I'm known for teaching yoga. But that was a choice that I made. I can't be a good teacher and help other people if I'm not aware of the boundary between when is this for me as the person in the healing and continuing to take care of that, and then the line between supporting and being there for others. I had to learn that. I went to coaching school to learn those differences. So there's a skill in the transition between doing something that is for yourself and then translating it and into helping other people. And it's not about me, right? And you think of the same way. Like, when you wrote your book, I would assume that you had in your mind what is valuable to other people, what is something that maybe sharing. Of course, sharing your stuff is going to come into it. My stuff is always brought into it, but it's not the end. And that's the point, that it's open-ended, that I can let go of the outcome because I'm not connected to how other people interpret my work in that way, which is kind of crazy to think that way. Like, how people want to run with what they experience with me. I love it. Like, I think that it's beautiful for someone to come do a yoga class with me or take a More to Love program. I'm not monitoring their quote unquote success or how a diet would be, like following it. Like, it's open-ended in a way. I need that. And I think it's so much more empowering when people feel that they can create their own sense of wellness, their own sense of health, and just kind of have this mishmash of stuff that now that I'm explaining it to you, now I don't feel so bad about why it took me so long. You know what I mean? Now I'm like,
oh yeah,
that's why. Wow. Okay, cool. Like, I feel better. I feel better that I didn't jump into this like 10 years ago. I'm glad it took the pace that it did right now, because I had to learn how I wanted to be with myself and the work.
So good. Yeah. I actually really identify with that. I actually have spoken about this on the podcast before, but I had a book proposal that I was working on 10 years ago that was kind of similar to what I ended up writing. It was like a cultural history of emotional eating. And I was very in it at the time too. I still thought of myself as an emotional eater. I was like motivated largely by my own issues with food and wanting to understand them and doing all this research to try to, and I was weaving in some memoir as well as having it be about this cultural history. And thank God I didn't write that then. Thank God I couldn't bring myself to finish the book proposal. There was just something not sitting right with me. I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't reason through how to structure this book or how to write a sample chapter or whatever. And so I just kind of let it sit. And that was always in my mind when I ended up doing the podcast a few years later, starting the podcast. And through this winding path of doing the podcast and starting to do this work professionally and getting to a place of true recovery and helping other people, that it was only through that I was able to then write the book that I wrote now. And, as a journalist, I've been a journalist now for almost 17 years, I think. And in that time, I've seen fellow journalists writing books left and right, and all these people much younger than me getting book deals. And it was often a source of frustration and comparison and shame and sort of self-abnegation to see this and be like, why haven't I written a book yet? I so want to write a book. I'd tried a couple other proposals after that first proposal and nothing went. And I was just had all these feelings about it. But now looking back, I'm like, thank God I did not write any of those books that I wanted to write sooner, because now I actually feel like I'm in the place to do it justice, and also for all the fear that I have around stepping into that greater level of visibility, the greater level of trolling I'm going to have, and sort of trying to create my boundaries and shore up my self-care before I get to that point. I know that I'm in such a better place that I'm even aware of that, even aware of needing to do that stuff. Because 10 years ago, I had no idea. And I was just an open book and an open wound, really walking around the world. And that's not a great position to go into a really visible place from. And I know people who do it and that make it work and are resilient and able to come out of that. And that's awesome. I'm glad that I didn't have to personally put myself through that.
Yeah. I mean, and it goes back to that. Our calendar time is not the deeper time. And I think it comes with age, right? I just turned 35. How I thought 5 years ago is so different. How I thought, and maybe this is now I kind of understand when people are like, it'll all come together, when I'd roll my eyes at that when I was, 25, 30 and being like, when am I going to feel okay in my body?
Yeah.
When am I going to get that book deal? I mean, now everyone's asking me, when am I opening a studio? That's what everyone's asking me. And I'm like, it's on my mind, but right now I'm like, you know what? I trust in how things work out when I do my homework. When nobody's looking in the quiet of my mind, in the quiet of night, in the quiet of my heart, when I'm doing my work, I trust that it'll all just pan out the way it's supposed to pan out. So people can ask, that's the expectations, right? That's, again, the same thing with dieting growing up, being like, oh, you'd look so cute if you just lost some weight, or, what about, it's that same, those external voices. It's so hard to shake that. And it comes up all the time in every area.
It really does. And I mean, I'm so struck again by those parallels, because I see so many clients and people in my courses and stuff having this desire for things to be different right now. And I so get it. I so get wanting to just, you're done with dieting, you're ready to change, you're ready to have an intuitive relationship with food in your body and just drop it all and feel better. Of course, we want to feel better. Of course, we want that relief. But also, there has to be this patience and this sort of that glacial time span that you're talking about of letting that be here and be okay too. And it's really tough when there's oppression. There's actual oppression happening to people, especially folks in the very largest bodies, right? It's a very difficult world to navigate when you're in a larger body and when you're being actively shamed and experiencing discrimination all the time. of course you want it to change right away. And we just don't have that ability. We don't have our society isn't there yet to be able to change overnight. And there is no diet that's going to change your body permanently and quickly, and there is no sort of fast solution. So what can we do to be resilient and to be okay in that in between state and to take care of ourselves and get relief when we need it? Like that's the thing, right? It's like having patience, but also having self-care in the moment.
Exactly. And it goes back to, why do people meditate? Why do people find those patience, hope, like all the things that have been the theme of humanity forever? When it becomes like the lesson for yourself, when it goes from abstract to like, oh crap, like I'm not patient at all. I need to figure that out. Like that's a spiritual question. And you're right. And, and also there's a level, at least for me and for you, of privilege that like I have the luxury to spend ample amounts of time pondering life's mysteries. That's not the case for a vast majority of the world. And I'm aware of that. And so how do you make space for that? My reality and what is available to me is not universal for everyone. That, survival, health, like just fundamental well-being at like the basic level is not available to people right in our own backyard. And that's where, at least for me, that aspect of looking beyond yourself and being humbled by the stuff that you don't understand. There's so much, the more I go down this, the more I understand, oh my God, I know so little about everything. Right. But then I feel like then it transforms to, well, how can I be a good gardener to what I can have leverage over, right? And it's a balance, because we all want to, change the world and make it better. But even saying that, it implies that you know what's best for the world. You know what's best for other people. And that's still arrogant. That's still privilege, that you have the tools. And it just, if other people just did what I did, if that's not dieting, I don't know what is.
Right. Oh.
And that can be translated into social justice, everything. So I think these are complex for a reason. And it always comes back to me, what am I doing for myself? And sharing. Actually, I have so here's a little thing. Maybe you'll find this interesting. Every year around New Year's, I make a list of maybe like 3 to 5 things that are sort of going to govern how I'm going to operate in the year. And I just sort of meditate on it. I don't really know what's going to happen. They just kind of things that feel like lessons to be learned with the upcoming year. And here's one, number 3 for my 2019: share and invite, but let go of the outcome. Meaning that you can share your story, you can invite people to the table, you can invite people to come and experience, but you cannot control how anyone is going to experience it. You cannot control and do that. And I feel like that's so much of what we struggle with ourselves, with other people, and in society, that sharing without a requirement for them to obey.
Yes. Which is so the thing with this work too, especially, and I know a lot of people listening probably feel this in their lives, where friends and family don't get it, right? That they're trying to recover from diet culture and don't want someone breathing down their neck about their body size or what they're eating, but having a really hard time conveying that to friends and family and wanting to just have everything change right in the moment. And I think that is something, that's a part of the practice too, of like just planting the seed, sharing and inviting them to your table, inviting them to like know what you know, maybe if it feels safe, but not expecting an outcome right away or at all necessarily. And trying to learn how to care for yourself in that too. Like, setting the boundaries you need to set to be okay with the fact that other people's journeys are going to be different. Other people might never get it, and that you still have to take care of yourself.
Right. And that's vulnerability. That's the essence of, and also the essence of coming to yourself. Like if you can speak what's true for you and know that even if other people don't understand it, that it's still true for you, that to me is a definition of confidence. That is it, right? Like everyone else can be thinking something else, but if and this isn't to be like alternate facts kind of thing, like or something, like, you know what I mean? But I have to say, it is interesting that the conversations that we're having in like the bigger political realm, these were the lines blur, and it's just kind of crazy, but we're not going to go down that road. Just going to say.
Right. And there are like objective realities.
It's too much for our brains to wrap around. And that's why I always say, notice my breath, notice my butt in the chair. Do I have water nearby? What's going to be for dinner? Like this, they sound so boring and so simple. It's so simplistic, but it's the shit that doesn't make us lose our minds.
Right. The basic self-care, the day to day. Yeah. I was just reading this piece. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but it's about how mindfulness might actually be sort of a balm to capitalism, like in a way that opiate of the masses type of thing, where it's a way that we learn to navigate the vagaries and horrors of living in a capitalistic society that puts all this pressure on us. And mindfulness can sort of help us get through it and be resilient to it. But in the process, like if we sort of interpret it as just a only sort of like a self-serving thing, the way that it's been sort of packaged and sold in Western culture a lot recently, that it's never going to lead to any real social change. And for there to be any sort of revolutionary potential with mindfulness or, similar spiritual practices, that it can't be divorced from the ethics of it. The idea that I can take care of myself, but also I want to extend this compassion outwards. And I just thought that was really, really interesting to ponder because, I definitely have this like dialectic in my life between getting really heated and just like reading the news all the time and being really in it with all the injustice that's going on in the world and feeling like I'm just going to claw my eyes out or, tear my hair out or something because I'm so upset. And then trying to figure out a way to like channel that energy in a productive way, but also like dial it down so I can take care of myself and unplugging and not looking at the news and not looking at social media and just sort of being in my cocoon and taking care of myself. And I think there's that ebb and flow that happens for me and that maybe has to happen for everyone if they're doing social justice work, because the term self-care, I've learned recently, was originally coined by, I think it was by Audre Lorde, for social justice activists. Like it was a term she used for activists to be able to like fill up their own cup so that they could go out and then continue to do revolutionary work. And I think that's really so interesting to think about like mindfulness and yoga and these sorts of practices as a part of that dialectic, as opposed to just like something that we do in our own individual life and never share or never come out of that in order to engage with the larger world and try to change the world.
Yeah, I mean, so in the yoga sutras, like the ancient texts of yoga, the first line is, now yoga begins, meaning that every time you have a breath, there's an opportunity to practice yoga. And like the second and third line has to do with, and the point of yoga and mindfulness is to end the chatter in your mind. Meaning it's not the end, it's a tool. And you're right, like there's so much what's it called, like navel gazing, that you're doing these things and just doing them in and of themselves makes it like sanctimonious. No. It is the ethics behind it. When you are coming from a place of steadiness and balance and are discerning between what's essential and what's not, then you can actually go out into the community and be of service. Even in yoga, like there's a whole lineage of yoga called karma yoga, where it is about service. And a lot of the larger faiths have that. And you don't really see that. Like I know yoga studios around here aren't like, and now we're going to go volunteer at the local, and that is the missing component. And while people want to feel less stressed, want to feel this way, you have to ask the question, because why? What will that alignment, what are you going to do with it? Right. And even if I have to answer that question, I'm like, oh, and I think about that all the time. Right. And it's sort of and then what from that, less stressed space, then what? And that's kind of what the article is talking about. I've seen it floating around, and I think it is really interesting. But yeah, the point of yoga is to help you. The word is called vritti, which means chatter in Sanskrit, and that's kind of what they're like. Yoga helps end the cessation of chatter in your mind. That's really about what I'm trying to do.
That's great.
Yeah, it's something so simple, right? So simple. It has nothing to do with lemon water and tight leggings and getting your leg around your mind. It's making you not be frantic. That was they were just trying to cope with their life.
I love that. Yeah, it's like an anxiety reduction strategy. It's a way to cope with that mental chatter. And the mental chatter is so much of what keeps us stuck, right? Like, I mean, I always try to point out with the podcast that I'm not just doing this because I want individuals to be able to feel freer and stop dieting and like enjoy their lives more. I love that. I want that for everyone listening, of course. But I don't think that's where it ends. I think it also extends to, like you said, what are you going to do with this new capacity now? What are you going to do with that extra mental space? And you don't have to answer that now. Like folks who are struggling and in it, maybe that's not the question you need to be asking yourselves, but maybe it is. Maybe like if you're really in it with an eating disorder, you need a sense of what purpose will this extra mental space serve once I can have it back from my eating disorder? Like, what do I want to do that is bigger than this? And let that drive you, let that help you move towards recovery. Not everybody knows what that is. I didn't know when I was in my 20s struggling with disordered eating, like what the purpose of my life was. So I think asking myself that question then was like panic inducing. But I know some folks who do feel really, really inspired and galvanized by this idea of like, I know that I want to fight to end racism, or I know that I want to work to help reproductive rights, or whatever it is that you're passionate about. And this eating disorder, this dieting, this chronic dieting is getting in the way of that. And so let me like try to reconnect with my why and my purpose in order to be able to drive towards a life where I can actually have the capacity to do that.
Amen. I mean, yeah, it is so much bigger than our own immediate needs. And as More to Love, I'm thinking of that now. I'm thinking beyond the like week to week, month to month. I'm like, what do I want this to look like in 5, 10, 50 years, right? And also, what if something happens to me? Does that mean that this work stops? I don't want that to happen. Like, I want this to continue in whatever way that it will. So I think that's just the part of us all that when we look so inward, there's only so much more you can find. Like, I feel like in my life, there's no like mystery rocks that I have not like looked under. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's no, I've done the terrain, I've done the scan. It is what it is. And now it's going forward, and helping people do that is enjoyable because it's me. It's an expression of me, and my work will always be an expression of me, and it could change, and I'm open to it changing. Like, it could be 10 years from now, it could be like doing something completely different. I have no idea. I'm not actively doing that, but I understand that's how life goes. And the same with healing. Like, you can't map out your healing in that like finite of a way. And that's what freaks people out, because we want the certainty. And that's, to bring it all back home, that's why diets were so appealing. It had a plan. Follow this step. You can expect this. It will take this long. You should expect, X pounds per week. Like, oh, assurances. Oh, that's what sells. So we're not stupid for falling for that either, right? Like, it's not like we're like idiots that we're like, oh, it makes sense that to have those insurance. Like, I followed weight loss programs because I genuinely believe that would have helped me. And like a lot of the stuff, there's even that sort of like forgiveness that has to come into the conversation, and that's something on the individual level, but also as a community and a culture. Like, how does forgiveness look in healing?
And especially, with family members who might have been purveyors of diet culture or indoctrinated someone into dieting before they gave consent. Like, how can you forgive or make forgiveness a possibility? Because I don't think people should push themselves to forgive either. Sometimes that's, just more of the same, like, I should be forgiving, so I'm going to,
you can't force forgiveness. You
No.
can't. It has its own time frame.
Yes. Going back to that sort of glacial pace that we were talking about. Like we all want it to happen so much faster, but it really needs to have its own timeline. It's also tricky and messy and so much like yoga in that sense, actually. What you were talking about with the sort of messiness of, not looking perfect or looking like the person with their leg behind their head or whatever. It's your own sort of internal messy process.
Embrace the messy. It's going to be okay.
Well, tell us, in terms of yoga, like what you've been up to with More to Love and your new project, Homebody. I'm really curious about that and how it ties into all the other work that you do.
Yeah. So as More to Love grew, I'm based in Boston and I teach regular classes here in the Boston area and retreats, but More to Love is seen by a lot more people that are in the Boston area. So I wanted to create a way for folks to experience yoga and More to Love yoga in the safety of their own home, meaning that I literally, through the program, take you from how do I even make a space in my home that feels like I can relax in, and sort of giving some tips both physically and also mentally on how to set up your space for yourself. And then going through the whole, there's if you're going to practice with me for about 6 weeks, what would you learn in 6 weeks with me? And the other piece that I really wanted to make sure that I was helping people do is that the classes are about 45 minutes long, but the lessons are all like 5 to 7 minutes long, meaning that you don't have to take away an hour and a half because that becomes too much. You're able to watch modules and themes and different, how do I make space for my belly? How do I increase balance and flexibility? So all the poses, all the little snippets are done in short, easy to watch videos, because I find that it can become too much, right? And if you're sort of going at your own pace, it's easier for you to really take your time and sort of go back to the mechanics and fundamentals of things. And then the classes, which are also all taped, put the pieces together and they all have themes. So it's called Homebody. I think we already said that. And it really was this way to, make your literal home a place that feels safe to practice yoga, but also what are the mechanics of practicing yoga in a body positive way, getting really honest about your belly. What do you do when you want a forward fold? Or how do you sit comfortably? How do all these props that people use and see, what are they for? Do you really need them? What do you need? What don't you need? So it's very honest, no, it's not flashy or bearish. It's just these are the simple, easy steps that it takes to do yoga at home, daily, whatever you need. And it's been when I launched it, I didn't expect it. The people that participated and joined it was way more than I had expected, which is awesome. Which is great to have. And so it's available through my website, and I have some even introductory videos that are free for folks to download, just to kind of get you excited about yoga and excited about moving in a way that's not going to be burdensome. You don't have to clean out a whole room in your house and change your lifestyle around. Again, I kind of built it with the knowledge of how much diets require you to rearrange your life so much. And for me, that was always a point of anxiety where I was I can't keep this up. So I wanted Homebody to not be a burden. I wanted it to feel like something that you could easily integrate into your life and also take it on the road with you. So you can watch it on mobile devices, your laptop, it's available on all devices. 2 minutes long, or maybe you have 50 minutes long, doesn't matter. So
that's awesome.
That's the goal. Yeah.
I love it. Where can people find that?
MoreToLoveYoga.com. And when you go on there, there's a big button. You can't miss it. It has all the info for you.
Fabulous. We'll put links to that in the show notes so people can find it, and definitely recommend people checking it out, especially if you're new to yoga or just want to start a home practice, because I think it's really awesome to have that ability. And like you said, it doesn't have to be burdensome or a whole thing or getting a class pass package or schlepping yourself to a yoga studio. It can just be really simple practices you can do every day at home.
Yeah, that's the point. Homebody.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. It's always a pleasure talking with you. And I love the depth and breadth of this conversation. It was so juicy.
Yeah, thank you for having me back.
So that's our show. Thanks again so much to Rachel Estapa for joining us on this episode, and thanks to you for listening. If you've gotten something out of this podcast, make sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or iTunes or your favorite podcast platform, whatever that may be. You can see all the places to subscribe at christyharrison.com/subscribe. That's christyharrison.com/subscribe. It's also super helpful if you leave us a nice rating and review in your podcast provider of choice and share this episode with a friend or loved one. That helps new people discover the podcast and helps spread this anti-diet message far and wide. If you're looking for some practical tips to help you get started on the anti-diet path for yourself, go ahead and grab my free audio guide, 7 Simple Strategies for Finding Peace and Freedom with Food. Just go to christyharrison.com/strategies to get it. That's christyharrison.com/strategies. To get full show notes from this episode, including all the resources we mentioned, plus a full transcript, just go to christyharrison.com/206. That's christyharrison.com/206. And to get the transcript, just scroll down to the bottom of the page and enter your email address where it says Get the Transcript. This episode was brought to you by my online course, Intuitive Eating Fundamentals. If you're ready to make peace with food, break free from diet culture, and reclaim the life it stole from you, learn more and sign up at christyharrison.com/course. That's christyharrison.com/course. A big thanks to our editor and engineer, Mike Lalonde, our administrative assistant, Julianne Watasek, and our community and content associate, Vinci Chue, for helping me out with all the moving parts that go into producing this show every week. Our album art was photographed by Abby Moore Photography and designed by Meredith Noble, and our theme song was written and performed by Carolyn Pennypacker Riggs. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, stay psyched.